Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating theological and legal text. It outlines how Islamic jurisprudence didn't just regulate historical slavery, but actually created systematic mechanisms to dismantle it. Now, it's a highly complex historical topic, so we're going to look exactly at how this source text structures its argument across legal, spiritual, and economic frameworks. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the modern thesis, move into restricting historical slavery, then the spiritual rewards of emancipation, atonement through freedom, zakat and state economics, and we'll wrap up with the final conclusion. All right, starting right off with Section 1, the modern thesis. The text opens with a seriously definitive, even provocative claim. Slavery does not exist today, and a future caliphate would not attempt to reintroduce it. You see, the text argues that the Prophet Muhammad came to free human beings from slavery to other human beings, ensuring they become slaves of Allah alone. The source positions this not just as some historical footnote, but as an absolutely core, overarching objective of the faith, completely rejecting the idea that the practice could or should ever be reintroduced by anyone today. Moving right along to Section 2, restricting historical slavery. Now, to really understand this, we have to look at the historical context. The source explicitly points out that Islam was revealed to a society that already owned slaves, which prompted a massive baseline shift. Before this new framework came into the picture, someone could be enslaved for simply falling into debt, as a punishment for a crime, or just as a standard prisoner of war. But Islamic law abolished all of those avenues completely. Instead, it restricted the means of enslavement strictly to one highly specific category alone, and that is the sabaya. So the crucial point is, what exactly is that? Well, sabaya refers to women and children who, back in ancient times, accompanied an army in war. And the text is super careful to note that this explicitly excludes female soldiers and standard prisoners of war. So why does this hyper-specific definition actually matter? Because, the source argues, sabaya literally do not exist in modern warfare. It's just not a thing anymore. And if the only legally permitted avenue to enslavement no longer exists, then the institution itself cannot exist today. Next up is Section 3, spiritual rewards of emancipation. Beyond just shutting down the legal avenues of enslavement, the text highlights this incredibly intense spiritual incentive designed to dismantle the existing institution from the inside out. Listen to this direct correlation. Whichever man frees a Muslim man, Allah Ta'ala will liberate for each of his organ an organ from the fire. The Sharia attached this literal organ-for-organ spiritual reward directly to the physical act of emancipation. It effectively made freeing a human being one of the absolute highest spiritual achievements a person could ever pursue. That brings us to Section 4, atonement through freedom. We also really need to look at a concept called kafara, which translates to expiation or atonement. Basically, it's a legislated penalty required to make amends for a sin or a crime. Let's see how this concept essentially built a systemic legal framework for freedom rather than just relying on, individual goodwill or charity. Just look at the sheer variety of acts that legally required the freeing of a slave as kafara. We're talking about applying severe punishments like whipping, breaking your oaths, accidentally killing a believer, invalidating the Ramadan fast by sexual intercourse, or even making a specific prohibited statement to a wife, like saying, "You are like my mother," and then returning to her. By legally tying all these incredibly common social, penal, and religious mistakes to the mandatory freeing of a slave, the legal system created a constant legislated pipeline of emancipation. And this brilliantly illustrates just how strict the physical protections were. Quoting Sahih Muslim 1657, "Whoever slaps his slave or strikes him, his atonement is to free him." The source uses this to demonstrate how closely physical abuse was legally policed. Think about that. A single slap resulted in the immediate, mandated freedom of the individual as the only acceptable legal atonement. All right, on to Section 5, zakat and state economics. So there are 8 specific, mandatory categories of zakat, that's the obligatory alms, as outlined in the Quranic verse Tawbah 960. You've got your standard economic categories here, the poor, the destitute, those in debt, and travelers. But notice the specific category we're highlighting today, freeing slaves, or fi rikabi. This shows that emancipation wasn't just left as a private religious matter for individuals. It was actually baked directly into the core economic wealth distribution channels of the state itself. In practical terms, this involved the state treasury, known as the Beit ul Mal. The Islamic State actively managed these mandatory zakat revenues and specifically spent money straight from the treasury to buy and free slaves. The dismantling of slavery was therefore organized as a state-funded economic enterprise. They were actively utilizing government revenue to buy out human freedom. Which leads us right into Section 6, the final conclusion. So, we arrive at the definitive conclusion presented by the source, formulated by Sheikh Taqiyuddin an-Nabhani. There does not remain even one situation in which enslaving occurs at all today. Accordingly, Islam has prevented slavery. Because the sole legally permitted avenue of enslavement, that ancient concept of sabaya, no longer exists in modern warfare, and when you combine that with the massive systematic legal and economic mechanisms that were explicitly designed to free existing slaves, the text concludes that this framework completely and permanently prevents the practice in the modern era. So, what does this all mean for us? How do historical, legal, and theological frameworks continue to shape modern interpretations of human rights? As you've seen in this explainer, examining the specific, on-the-ground mechanisms of ancient texts, everything from state economic policies to penal atonement, offers a highly structured window into how complex historical issues were dismantled. It's absolutely crucial to keep questioning the structures of the past to better understand the arguments of the present. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.